And
there's only one radio station that connects you
me?
to DePaul University.
I don't know. I just enjoy it.
Chicago.
My kind of town.
And the world.
I guess it's just because you're different somehow.
It's Radio DePaul.
You hear me?
Chicago's College Connection.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new show, kind of. I'm your host, Garret Neal, and this is your box office breakdown. We got a rebranding. Last quarter, I did Weekly Movie Rewind. I decided to cut out some of the news section in the middle. I might make a movie news show later, but I thought that right now, or at least for this show, just wanted to focus on the box office, give a breakdown of what happened this last weekend, get a look ahead at what's going to happen maybe next weekend, and keep it a shorter show. That one ranged in time from like 25 minutes to 45 to pretty much an hour at times. This one definitely going to keep it quick and succinct, and I think that's going to improve the quality and certainly the focus of the show a little bit. And so, that being said, without further ado, let's get into what happened last weekend at the box office. So, of course, the big release was Ready Player One, and Ready Player One finished atop the box office. Ready Player One, the new sci-fi action film directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Emily Clark and Ty Sheridan. Virtual reality world, super cool. I saw it twice. I guess technically only one of them counted for the weekend because one of them was on Wednesday night. So technically I'm only one of those, but I was a fan. Came away with an A- cinema score, 64 Metascore, 8.0 on IMDb, 75% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with a 6.9 average rating on 277 reviews, and an 80% audience score. It was like 13,000 reviews or whatever. So generally getting some positive feedback. It made 41.7 million over the 3-day weekend. These are all via Box Office Mojo, and while it was Easter weekend, we're taking the 3 days. We're not elevating. We're not getting any artificial elevation to any of these movies' numbers. We're gonna keep it simple, keep everyone on that level playing field where they should be, and just gonna go from there. And this was actually good old Steve's largest opening in 10 years, and of course that last film was The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in 2008, which made, wow, I didn't write down how much it made. I will get that number in a jiffy. Made 100 million. Wow, that was rough times for us all. Of course, I was part of that as well. I remember I went and saw that for my birthday. That's a whole nother. I went and saw a lot of bad movies for my birthday. Unfortunately, sorry to my friends in the past. Yeah, drug you guys to a lot of bad. Wow, I'm already going off the rails, and it's 4 minutes in. I said I was going to keep it concise, and I lied. Ready Player One also brought in 128 million globally, including 61.7 million in China, which is the largest Warner Brothers opening in that market of all time, which is very interesting. That I guess they don't have a ton of success there. And opening comparisons, it opened very similarly to G.I. Joe Retaliation, which opened to 50 or 42 million, and also Terminator Salvation, which opened to I think 40 million. So around the same numbers there, but G.I. Joe Retaliation was 40.5 million and Terminator Salvation was 42.5. So I was mixed up in those. And G.I. Joe Retaliation finished with $122 million, Terminator Salvation with $125 million. But of course, those films did not get nearly the positive response that Ready Player One has gotten. So I would expect Ready Player One to hold a little bit better than those films did and probably make closer to 150, 175 over its run. Nothing really competing in the same market next week for Ready Player One, but then Rampage comes out in 2 weeks, which will probably compete with a lot of the same audience. It'll be interesting to see how Ready Player One holds compared to that Dwayne Johnson action flick that I am personally very excited for. Looks like it knows exactly what it's doing. But we'll get to that next week. Ooh, exciting. Coming in at number 2, Tyler Perry's Acrimony at $17.1 million in just over 2,000 theaters. That one also had an A- cinema score. But the rest of the ratings didn't really quite agree. 30 on the Metascore, 4.7 on IMDb, with a 51% what I don't know what that was. Audience rating. Wow, 51% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes with 570 ratings with an average of a 3.1 out of 5 score. I didn't take the regular rating on Rotten Tomatoes, the percent, because there was only 19 critic reviews, I think. But just interesting to see that it has not had super great reviews, but still got that A- cinema score. So whatever, man. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that holds next week. I would project it to not hold super well, but we'll see. We'll see. I don't think that any dramas of that sort are really coming out next week. So, I don't know. Would not expect it to be in the top 5. Meanwhile, coming in at number 3, in its 7th weekend, Black Panther holding strong. 33% drop from last weekend in just under 3,000 theaters. It made $11.5 million in its 7th weekend, bringing its total gross up to just under $651 million. But that $650.9 million is enough to bring it into the top 5 all-time domestic grossing films. Big congratulations to Black Panther. I think it had been in the top 5, but Avengers was passed out, of course, last weekend. But Black Panther next weekend will certainly pass Jurassic World, which is sitting at number 4 right now at $652 million. And fortunately, to my disappointment, will knock Titanic down one more spot, as Titanic is sitting at number 3, with $659 million. So that will also likely fall next week. If not next week, certainly in 2 weeks. Then Avatar is sitting at number 2 right now at $760.5 million. So highly, highly unlikely that Black Panther will come even close to that. And Force Awakens is just sitting cool up top with $936 million domestic gross. Incredible. And Black Panther also added $7.7 million worldwide, which almost into the top 10. That brings it to 11th all-time, passing Beauty and the Beast. The remake came out last year, which had a global gross of $1.263 billion, and Black Panther now at $1.275 billion. Next week, it's going to hop into that top 10. Very exciting. We'll knock Frozen out of the top 10, which Frozen right now sitting at $1.276. So it's got that extra $1,000 that it's holding over. Or I guess that's an extra million. My fault. Whoops. But certainly we'll still get passed by Black Panther. Next week, the Black Panther will be top 10 worldwide grossing of all time. Very exciting stuff. Then coming in at number 4, we have the domestic sensation faith-based film I Can Only Imagine, bringing in $10.4 billion, holding steady, only dropping 23% from last week. This film, in its third week, had a budget of $7 million. Its gross already up to $55 million. This thing has been crazy big. Actually, I listened to the song when they announced this film. It's not a bad song. I can understand why the song was such a huge hit. And yeah, people are liking the movie too, and it actually just became Roadside Attractions, the studio for this film, became their highest grossing film of all time just in week 3. It's already passed Manchester by the Sea, which was previously Roadside Attractions' highest grossing film of all time at $47.6 million. And yeah, not even close. I Can Only Imagine will continue adding to that lead as the weeks roll on. And yeah, I guess it's really no surprise that it had a big Easter weekend. Of course, that's a big weekend for that audience, but we'll talk about another one that didn't do so hot. Coming in at number 5, wrapping up that top 10, last week's number 1 film. That was the first to unseat Black Panther at the box office. Pacific Rim Uprising in week 2 had a whopping 66.7% drop, bringing in $9.3 million in this weekend in 3,700 theaters. Really not a big surprise. Did not get great audience ratings. Also, Ready Player One probably stole most of its audience. I mean, obviously the same action sci-fi genre, and I gotta think a lot of people that hadn't seen Pacific Rim Uprising its first weekend were definitely going to see Ready Player One this weekend, and probably not a ton of people wanted to see Pacific Rim twice, because that's the type of film it was. Sherlock Gnomes, meanwhile, just some other quick notes. Sherlock Gnomes dropped out of the top 5 in its second weekend, coming in at $7 million, a 34% drop. Love, Simon in its third weekend held with 37.3%, also doing pretty solid. Brought in $4.7 million at the number 9 spot this weekend. And one of the other new releases, God's Not Dead, A Light in the Darkness, the third film in the God's Not Dead franchise, came in well under expectations at $2.6 million this weekend in about 1,700 theaters, especially in Easter weekend. This one was expected to do definitely better than that. It wasn't supposed to be gangbusters, wasn't supposed to compete with I Can Only Imagine, but I suspect some people are tired of that franchise, and also I don't think that they were expecting I Can Only Imagine to be as big as it has been, and that, again, I think took a lot of that audience away. So that's, before we go from this week's box office, we always got to check in that per theater average, which really no surprise here. Isle of Dogs, which expanded into 165 theaters this weekend. This, of course, the new Wes Anderson film. And it grossed $17,839 per theater, and bringing its weekend gross was $2.9 million. Highly recommend that one if you have not seen it. It's very Wes Anderson, but it's a very well done, family film. Kind of dark, but very enjoyable. And that will wrap up this week's box office. We'll take a quick break before we come back and a quick preview of what will happen next week. We got some John Cena and John Krasinski action. Battle of the Johns there. Big stuff. So stick around. We'll be right back. I'm your host, Garret Neal, and you're listening to the Box Office Breakdown. There we go. I keep forgetting the new name of my show. It's terrible. On Radio DePaul, Chicago's College Connection. All right, welcome back, everybody, to your Box Office Breakdown. There we go. I remembered it that time. I'm your host, Garret Neal, and you're listening, of course, to Radio DePaul, Chicago's College Connection. Let's see what's happening next week. First out the gate, we got Blockers is the radio-appropriate title for this film. Of course, you'll notice in every single logo and poster of this film, there is a rooster in front of the name of this film. So you older folks at home, you'll understand what that means. Right now, Blockers, of course, R-rated comedy film featuring John Cena, where three parents try to stop their daughters from completing a sex pact on prom night. Those pesky parents, am I right, kids? Yeah, okay. Anyway, this one's coming in 3,300 theaters right now, projected by Box Office Mojo, and it's got a 75 Metascore with a 6.1 on IMDb, and 88% average on Rotten Tomatoes with a 6.9 average rating in 50 critic reviews. And so what it's got going for it? Slightly more positive reviews than honestly I thought it would get. This has looked really bad from the trailers. Really, the only thing that stuck out, the only thing that they show is that John Cena chugs beer in his butt and then he farts in a guy's face. And I'm like, wow, that seems like quality stuff. But supposedly it's getting decent buzz. Maybe not great, but decent. And it's going to be interesting. This is really the first big film we've seen John Cena do outside of being the voice of Ferdinand the Bull earlier this year, or I guess late last year. And so it'll be interesting to see how much of a box office draw is John Cena, because we don't really know. I think, obviously, this draws Rock comparisons because of their wrestling backgrounds, but I think we can't say he's The Rock just yet. And it took The Rock a few movies to be The Rock as well. Some questionable comparisons that I came up with. I came up with questionable comparisons for every film. Not very good at coming up with comparisons, but I like to do it because it's good practice. I thought Game Night, which came out a handful of weeks ago, another R-rated comedy, this one with Jason Bateman as its lead, probably the most recognizable guy there. That brought in $17 million, and it opened in 3,000, almost 500 theaters there. It was also competing with Black Panther. That was Black Panther's second week, so it had a lot of competition. Obviously, Blockers will be competing with Ready Player One week 2. Not quite the same as Black Panther week 2, but it's similar with Game Night. It's R-rated comedy and not a ton of necessarily star power, but a little bit. Game Night also had Rachel McAdams. So I think that one's not bad. Obviously, the subject matter of the film is completely different. One that's a little more similar in subject matter was Neighbors, which obviously came out a while ago. That one opened in 3,278 theaters, and that opened to $49 million, but it had no really big competition. This was obviously also a summer movie. This also had Zac Efron in it, Seth Rogen. This had a lot more hype leading up to it. I think there's no real way that Blockers gets close to that much. Right now, Box Office Pro has its long-range forecast set at $16 million this weekend, which is 10% up from last week. So it's trending in the right direction along the lines of that positive buzz, so we'll see. Maybe up could get $20 million if it really surprises, but not expecting too much. The next big release we got this week is A Quiet Place, directed, co-written by, and starring John Krasinski. This one is the story of a family that's forced to live in silence while hiding from creatures that hunt by sound. This one has gotten a lot of hype recently. It's sitting at a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 8.2 with 39 critic ratings. Got a 79 Metascore and an 8.4 on IMDb. This one's got Emily Blunt and John Krasinski, as I said earlier, powering it as far as box office potential right now. And some comps, questionable comps, as always, I came up with. Oh, I didn't give the particulars. This one's opening in 3,200 theaters, and it's PG-13, which I thought was strange, judging from the trailers and forgetting the rating. I totally thought it was rated R, but apparently it's PG-13. Both of the comps I came up with were rated R, because this certainly feels like a rated R movie. But I came up with The Final Destination, which is the fourth Final Destination film, because a lot of the horror movies are based off a book or based off some pre-existing thing or franchise. So it was hard to really come up with comps, because a lot of the big, like, original idea horror films don't really open up that big. So I couldn't really come up with any good comps. Obviously, also, I'm terrible at comps. But The Final Destination, rated R, opened up in 3,121 theaters, so a little bit less. That opened as $27.4 million. That also came out in August, so not really the same time there. Also, Scream 4, which actually came out a lot more recently than I thought, but still an older comp. That opened in 3,300 theaters, so a lot more, or 100 more theaters than this, and that opened to $18 million. That did also open in the same month as this film. But obviously Scream, while built on existing franchise, that's one that didn't really have a lot of ground underneath it at that point. I think everyone was pretty much done with Scream by the fourth one. And this one has just so much positivity coming into this weekend. I think it's really peaking at the right time, and I think you could really see it go above its expectations right now. Box Office Pro has its long-range forecast set at $27.5 million, projected to, I think, take the weekend, because I definitely think Ready Player One will drop below that. And it's up 6% from last week, so again, unsurprisingly trending in the right direction. I think it will. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes over 30 million, because I think it's got a ton of positive vibes. I'm very, very excited to go see that this weekend. Then two more smaller releases, but these are still technically worldwide releases, because they are over 1,000 theaters. We have, oh gosh, I'm going to say this wrong, Chappaquiddick, I believe, which is a historical drama thriller starring Kate Mara and Jason Clarke and Ed Helms, also Jim Gaffigan. And it is about Ted Kennedy's involvement in the fatal 1969 car accident that claims the life of a young campaign strategist, Mary Jo Capuchin. I probably should have looked up how to say her last name, but that's probably not it. This one, haven't really heard a lot about this one. It's PG-13, opening up in 1,500 theaters. Has not gotten a great critical response so far. 6.1 on IMDb with a 65 Metascore, 71% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 7.3 average rating. So that's actually pretty decent. With 21 critic scores. I wasn't even worried about comps for this one. I couldn't really find anyone. But the long range forecast is set at 3.5 million, just as it has been. I would not be surprised if it fell under that. And the last one, as we wrap up the show here, gosh, I'm still rambling too much. This is going to be a tight show. I like it. It'll help me stay on task. But the last one is The Miracle Season, a sports drama that I believe is based on a true story. After the tragic death of star volleyball player Caroline Found, a team of dispirited high school girls must band together under the guidance of their tough love coach in hopes of winning the state championship. This one had no actors in it that have really any notable box office power. This one opening in 1,700 theaters. It's PG. Just kind of, I did find some comps for this one that I actually think are pretty good. Kind of like a high and low boundary of this. First of all, this one has not had any critic ratings released at all, which is never a good sign. That just shows very much a lack of faith by the distributor in this film. If it does end up getting more of a negative review, I think Pride, which is a 2007 sports drama with Terrence Howard and Bernie Mac that opened in 1,500 theaters, it's made about $3.5 million, received about 50s ratings across the board, 5s, 50s, whatever. And that was about a swimming team, so also a similarly non-mainstream sport. And then if it does get better reviews, then I thought maybe Warrior, which came out in 2011 with Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton, and that one opened in 1,800 theaters, and that one made about $5 million. Which that one was also a very, very well critically received film. So that's definitely the tops that it could get. Right now, the long-range forecast for that is set at $3.5 million. Since there's been no scores released, I'm expecting it's going to get negative reviews. And so I would expect it to come around 3.5, maybe a little less. But that's going to do it for the inaugural episode of the Box Office Breakdown, which is pretty much a continuation of the Weekly Movie Rewind, but without the news and a little more streamlined as far as box office content. Definitely went more in depth for the next week releases. That was very fun. I like that. Hopefully you guys liked it too, and you'll come back next week, same time. Gotta love that Monday night slot, because it's right after. Those box office numbers are fresh off the presses. It's great. I'll be here. Hope you'll be here. Hope you enjoyed. I'm Garret Neal, signing off, and you're listening to Radio DePaul, Chicago's College Connection.
Consent.
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 Consent is a clear yes. It's ongoing, voluntary,